In episode 9, we established that the Israelite community grew great in number at the site of Tel El Daba in the Delta, reaching a size of approximately 250 hectares. This is an incredible size that could have accommodated tens of thousands. According to experts, there would have been as many as 20 other settlements other than Avaris in the Delta region. These would be necessary as Exodus 12:37 says about 600,000 men were on foot on the Exodus, excluding women and children. That would bring the number up to well over 2 million people living there just prior to the departure from Egypt. So there had to have been other settlements. One exciting discovery was just made by Professor Manfred Biatak was that he had found one settlement at Wadi Tumalat, which today is a dried-up valley, but in Moses' day was a very large lake. In this area, there are 14 Hebrew toponyms being used. A toponym is a word that is used to name a given place. Scholars have found that toponyms provide a valuable insight into the historical geography of a particular region. In 1954, English medieval historian Sir Frederick Powick said of a place name study that it uses, enriches, and tests the discoveries of archaeology and history and the rules of the philologists, who are experts in the field of studying oral and written records. The adoption of toponyms have historically and globally been used to preserve an area's culture or history, especially for specific places where a major event was known to take place. So the question is, what are these Hebrew place names doing in the center of Egypt? The answer Biatek provides is that it was settled by Hebrews in ancient times, and it would have been a settlement like that of Avaris. So although we have not yet uncovered all these settlements to make up for the total population of Israelites living in Goshen, we can conclude that we can prove that they were all living in the general area. Exodus 12:38 tells us that a mixed multitude went up also with them. This is a clear indication that there were other groups joining in from other communities apart from the original or main departure point. As they left in haste, from verse 33, the people left from the city of Kontir, the city just a few kilometers north of Avaris, which the Bible calls Pi-Ramesses, a later change for their reference, and left for Succoth, where they have said to camp. Succoth we know today to be an ancient Egyptian settlement at the western edge of the Sinai Desert, just north of the Gulf of Suez. So Succoth was day 2 or 3 since leaving Goshen. At this point, we need to take a step back to briefly examine why God chose Moses to be their leader. Much of his life, from the time he was born to the time that he murdered an Egyptian guard, has been completely omitted from the Bible. However, much has been uncovered by the works of Philo of Alexandria, which tell us that when God appears to Moses in the burning bush, he urges him to take charge of the Israelites not as an accessory to their liberation, but as the commander or general. In his essay, De Vita Moses, he continues to refer to Moses as the Israelites' commander no fewer than 11 other times. This would help us understand that when Moses lived under Pharaoh's court, he would have been made a general who had developed the ability to rank, file, and control legions, with the ability to lead an army, and quite possibly to lead the taskmasters to watch over slaves. Flavius Josephus tells us that when Moses became an adult, Pharaoh appointed Moses as general in command of the Egyptian army. At one point, Egypt was attacked by Ethiopia. Moses uses a brilliant maneuver through the wilderness and defeats the Ethiopians, who flee and return to their capital. Exodus 13:18 gives us a hint to his skills of rank and order. And the children of Israel went up in orderly ranks out of the land of Egypt. Moses would have had the ability to organize and direct such a multitude on a massive operation as this. And now, as we better understand the role Moses plays as a military or corrections leader, it will make the following piece of evidence much easier to understand. As mentioned in the previous episode, we presented the turquoise mines at Serabit el-Kadim, where Hebrew slaves worked. Near the entrances were found a great number of stone shards with various inscriptions related to the mining operation, all named with the prefix Sinai, followed by a numeric reference. Most of these shards were never translated until recently by Dr. Douglas Petrovich, a professor of biblical studies and Egyptology and of ancient Near East history. What is called the Sinai 361 Moses inscription. This finding reads, "Our bound servitude had lingered. Moses then provoked astonishment. It is a year of astonishment because of the lady." This amazing find verifies 3 different facts: that there were Hebrews under bound servitude by the Egyptians. It proves that the Proto-Sinaitic inscriptions inside the mines mentioned in the previous episode is in fact written by Hebrews, and this being the very first time we see the name Moses in the archaeological record, proves he was in fact historical. It is clear that this astonishment is a referral to the 10 plagues. Because of the lady is a direct reference to the cow goddess Hathor, whom this entire mine is dedicated to. It is believed that when Moses delays on Mount Sinai later in the Exodus, the golden cow was likely the goddess Hathor, whom they used to serve. Therefore, this stop in Succoth allowed the Hebrew miners to join on their journey. From Succoth, the Israelites continued on the road headed towards the land of Midian. Convention states that Mount Sinai is in the southern region of the Sinai Peninsula, but we know now that that cannot be true. The Sinai is still Egyptian territory, as it always was in antiquity. However, the land of Midian has to be outside of Egyptian control. Moses was in exile in Midian years earlier because it was outside. Philo places Midian east of Sinai Peninsula. Also, the Apostle Paul confirms in Galatians 4:25 that Mount Sinai is in Arabia. That means all traffic from Egypt proper to the land of Midian was on a highway from Succoth across the peninsula towards the ancient city of Eloth at the northern tip of the Gulf of Aqaba and south into the land of Midian. The following encampment they reach is Etham, at the edge of the wilderness. Those with the conventional view of the Exodus has them headed south towards the southern tip of the peninsula. However, they were never able to find any Etham anywhere along this route. However, there is an Etham at the opposite side of the desert just outside the edge. It appears here on ancient maps, and sometimes called Etham, Itham, Yetham, or Utam. This is an ancient supply settlement stoppage point prior to entering the several-day journey across the Sinai wilderness for those headed westwards. At this point, that Pharaoh has a change of heart, and in verses 5 through 9, decides to pursue them. From Etham, we get an unusual instruction by God in Exodus 14:2 to turn and camp before Pi-hahiroth. Unusual because the only established routes out of Etham is westward towards Succoth and eastward on its descension towards Eloth on the Gulf. The only reason to do this, according to the text, is to provoke Pharaoh to continue pursuing. If they go the way of Eloth, Pharaoh will have no choice but to turn back to Egypt, since the Israelites would have made it across the border to Arabia. But instead, they turn southwards into Wadi Watir, and according to God, Pharaoh will say, "They are bewildered by the land. The wilderness has closed them in." This makes perfect sense, as this route brings them into Wadi Watir. They are, quite literally, closed in by walls of mountains. There's no turning out of it. The Egyptians are closing in from behind, and they can only move forward, following the winding path of the wadi. In addition to the verse, "The wilderness has shut them in," Exodus 14:3, we also have the testimony of Josephus, who states in his Antiquities of the Jews, "For there was on each side a ridge of mountains that terminated at the sea, which were impassable by reason of their roughness, and obstructed their flight." Indeed, this wadi leads the Israelites directly to the Red Sea, which is the right arm of the sea we call today the Gulf of Aqaba. This point where it meets the sea is a large flood plain, roughly 40 square kilometers, that can be seen from space. Although extremely large, there is no escape, as the mountains to the north and to the south sweep into the sea, which is precisely what we read in the text. This also would have been easily large enough for 2 million to camp. God instructs that this is where they are to camp before Pi Hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea. Pi Hahiroth has been discovered to be under the ruins of a more recent fortress found at the north end of the plain. We can put to rest the debate as to what body of water the Israelites cross. Unlike the other prospective bodies of water that was put forward by other researchers, such as the lakes north of the Suez, which are much too shallow, with no mountains to shut them in. This point fits the Bible narrative perfectly, and the Bible continually refers to the great deep, the mighty waters, and the depths of the sea. Join me next time as we look at how the events unfolded that fateful night, as God's pillar of fire by night blocks the Egyptians while God opens the waters of the deep for what will forever be known as the greatest miracle by the hand of God in the Old Testament, the Red Sea crossing. Here on Evidence Uncovered.